Yeah, I'm still here. It's been a minute. Last time I was here, I made a bunch of people angry, which is hilarious, and you're welcome. Then I took a socially distanced minute to hang out with family for an occasion. And then I got a wicked scratch on my cornea because my daughter jammed her finger into my eye. I'm really sorry that you have to look at this. But at the same time, I'm not sorry because, you know, why would I be? I didn't do it. Anyway, now I'm back. Great story, huh? You know, when my hair is up, that like I couldn't give less fucks. I also like didn't like blend my makeup apparently. Today we are talking about the podcast that Gabbie Hanna put out on her 15th channel the other day with Trisha Paytas. Now, if you've been here before, you know that I don't always agree with Gabbie Hanna. The way she does things, the way she talks to people, the way she talks about people, the way she acts, the way she reacts, the way she sticks her rabid teenage stands on anyone who deigns to disagree with her. But I will say, adamantly, and with great earnesty, with great earnest, I'll say it earnestly, I try to go into everything I review in general, just a general rule, with an open mind and a backseat to my bias. Keep that in mind, even if you hear something you don't like about someone you do like, okay? My job is to criticize, not to berate people for existing. Also, if you haven't been here before, subscribe or whatever. Like, you could look at this eye all the time. I'm gonna sit back here, I think, for the duration of the video. So after a summer full of drama, some of which was with Trisha Paytas specifically, some of which I have covered here on this channel, which you would know if you were subscribed. I think a lot of people were really surprised to see Trisha and Gabbie sit down together and hash it out. Personally, I was amped to see it. Regardless of how I feel about the people involved, I will always cheer on maturity and tying up loose ends, especially if it benefits all parties involved. And this could have been that. I speak a little bluntly, a little sarcastically, I talk like a bitch. I'm not a bitch.
Well, I'm a little bit of a bitch.
I speak bluntly, okay? This podcast was like an hour and 27 minutes long, right? This podcast was an hour and 24 minutes of Gabbie Hanna just talking, roughly. Not that it was all bad, but sort of the recurring thing I'm seeing in feedback to her podcast in general is that she talks too much and she's not letting her guests speak. Like, I tried to make it through the episode with the quacky doctor with the aliens and shit, but like I couldn't make it past 30 minutes because the ad reads were incredibly forced, and it was frustrating that she would ask him a question and while he was answering it she'd interrupt him with like another question. It just makes it really frustrating to listen to. I've seen her say in her Instagram stories that she's working on it, you know, she's taking the feedback in or whatever, and that's great, but like, oof. This was a lot. So basically Gabbie and Trisha sat down with a bunch of Dominoes they didn't eat, and Trisha listened to Gabbie talk for a very long time. As you probably noticed, this is part 1 of 2 because wow, there's a lot and also kind of nothing to talk about. But I wanted to separate my thoughts in 2 ways because they're drastically different. So this is going to be the part where I tell you what I thought about the things that were said and the thoughts and the things and the podcast and the whole as a whole. The next part, I'm going for a deep nasty dive in the comments section of the podcast because there was a lot of really interesting things, perceptions, ideas, and whatnot going on in there. Oh my god, it's already 9 minutes in. Subscribe, I'm very tired. Our recurring theme with the younger portion of Gabbie Hanna's audience is bandying about the term gaslighting and bandying it about absolutely incorrectly. Earlier in the summer, Gabbie Hanna used it wrong and then they picked it up and ran with it, and now anytime anyone says I don't remember that, or no, they're gaslighting you. In this portion and in the next portion, you're going to hear the term gaslighting a lot, I would imagine. So we're gonna keep a running tally and do a shot of water every time I say gaslighting or gaslight or gaslit. Please drink your water responsibly. Gaslighting, by definition, is to try to manipulate someone into feeling insane, or to question their own sanity, or to question events that happened, right? It's very interesting that there's this huge dichotomy in how like a portion of the audience saw things and how another portion of the audience saw things. Obviously, the bigger portion of Gabbie's audience, and I don't believe anyone who says, I'm not even a Gabbie fan, and I believe that's a sock account for a Gabbie stan. That's just my hypothesis. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's a few of them out there who are legitimate, but by and large, I would say that's not the case. One portion of the audience thought that Trisha was gaslighting Gabbie Hanna. The other portion of the audience thought Gabbie Hanna was trying to gaslight Trisha Paytas. Now, regardless of the truth, which we'll never have, like, you can take them both at face value and like just move forward. One of them is wrong in this situation, right? It does weird me out that Gabbie Hanna has screenshots for everything. That she seems to have like a file of all the times people have wronged her. Like, why? Would it be right of Trisha to say this never happened if it actually did? And she knew that it did? No. Would it be right of Gabbie Hanna to insist that it happened if she knew that it didn't? No. Let's call this gaslighting shit show a wash and like just move on. Agree to disagree, take a big collective sip of water, okay?
It's important to hydrate.
This podcast made me feel very frustrated. I came to this podcast with a very clear and open mind, and I want to be very, very clear about that again, because I know this is something people like to throw at anyone who criticizes Gabbie Hanna in any way. As an adult, okay, and maybe not as an adult, maybe this is my personality type, but as a woman in my 30s, I have to say, and don't throw the ageism thing at me, we're getting there eventually, okay? As a woman in my mid-30s, I would rather have my mind changed. I just think that's way more peaceful and productive than like getting frustrated by someone's repeated shitty ass behavior. You know what I mean? As much as you think I want to see Gabbie Hanna fail or fuck up or get in some drama or whatever, I don't. I want to see her win. I want to see Trisha Paytas win. I would love to see both of these women reach their full potential for redemption. But I'm not going to stop calling it like it is.
Preemptive defense.
Now, I'm going to tread lightly with these words. Believe it or not, it is never my intention to invalidate or dismiss someone's feelings or experiences. That said, with all due respect, a great deal of this episode felt like Gabbie Hanna trauma dumping on Trisha Paytas. There's clearly a lot of hurt inside Gabbie Hanna. She's clearly been very deeply affected by the circumstances and situations of her life. That's undeniable. I'm not the gatekeeper of when you should be able to talk about your traumas or the things that hurt you, especially because I know with trauma, a lot of other situations can trigger the trauma to come up, and you know, that's how trauma works. For the first time, I will say it, like, I think Gabbie was self-aware enough to know that, because she says in her description that something to the effect of Trisha Paytas was my therapist for an hour and a half. I want to separate this thought from the fact from what I'm about to say, because I do think it's fine to talk about your traumas. You know, it's her podcast. Go off, do what you gotta do. But you're on a podcast with a guest, not a podcast with a co-host or a podcast by yourself. You should talk to your guests. It should be an interactive experience if you're having guests on your podcast, especially one that you know people are going to click on. There was no conversation in this podcast. This was an extensive monologue about Gabbie Hanna's past and trauma, and yeah, okay, maybe touching on those subjects to understand why she was so deeply affected by the things that happened between she and Trisha makes sense, but it definitely took over the entire episode. Nothing was said. They took 3 breaks because things either got heated or I believe the word manic was used. And I feel like every conversation that they had that was meaningful, that was hashing it out, was said off camera, which is fine. If you want to handle things off camera, handle them off camera, that's totally fine. But don't then make a podcast where you're like, oh, we're hashing it out, when you hashed nothing out. Their situation was barely even touched upon. Honestly, I think those 3 breaks were the only time Trisha Paytas was allowed to speak, which I'm looking forward to going to the comment section in the next video because there's some interesting perceptions on that too. So there are a few like kind of quick fire things that like really made me go, huh? Or like made me go, Gabbie says that people were feeding her information about Trisha talking shit about her, right? And this is not news, like that was a thing she said before. She kept asking these people if she could confront Trisha with the information she was given, and everybody kept telling her no. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding these facts or if this just doesn't make sense to me. Again, as an adult in my 30s, I don't mean to keep harping on the like as an adult part of this, but I think a lot of what the behaviors of Gabbie that I see, and I'm not trying to be condescending or rude about this, but they're very, very like immature behaviors that like I remember emulating when I was young. And that's my experience. You know, maybe I'm perceiving it differently, but I don't think that I am. Regardless of who is saying it and how many people are saying it, if I'm being presented with this information that someone I'm not friends with, but I know of, that we kind of run in the same circles, is saying these things about me, what I'm going to do is say, hey, I'm going to address this with person. I'm not going to tell her that you told me this. Because clearly a lot of people have told her, Trisha said X, Y, and Z about you, right? You're telling me this queen of the subtweet can't speak vaguely enough to address this with Trisha and not reveal who said what. Really? It seemed like that would have been an easy opportunity to squash this whole thing. When talking about her past, Gabbie talks about how she wasn't really allowed to make friends as a kid because of her sort of upbringing, her mom, her parents, whatever. When she made friends, she fell in kind of with the mean girl crowd and stayed there, not really realizing that there was anything outside of that. I have 2 main thoughts about this. One, the way she speaks about this as if she is some feral being thrown into a social circle and being expected to just acclimate. From a hyperbole standpoint, that's completely legit. However, after even a number of years, I find it hard to believe that you, in a civilized society, you could find no other way to see any other way to live except being involved in like gossip and shit talk. My 2 cents. And secondly, if you're talking about that in the hyperbolic sense, or even I guess the metaphorical sense, that's life. I think Gabbie Hanna's issue, from, you know, I'm not trying to diagnose or sum her up, I guess. From all the things I've seen her say, heard her say, all the things I've heard her say, it just seems like she's so wrapped up in what life should be about, how people should see her, the impression she should be making, that I feel like she's just missing her own life. Like breaking out of what she calls like a toxic friend group and realizing that there's more to life than like shit talking and gossip and all of that. It's just called growing up. Like, that's just growing into an adult person. The things that you care about at like 23 are vastly, drastically different than the things you care about at 30. And that's normal. I don't think Gabbie realizes that what she's experiencing is very, very normal. I may be oversimplifying a little bit, but this whole like, who am I? I've been playing a character for 6 years. What do I look like to other people? What do I sound like to other people? Like, respectfully, there's no harm in thinking introspectively or existentially. But I think those thoughts have just kind of consumed her. And that's why I think a lot of people, or at least myself, I'll just only speak for myself, that's why I perceive a lot of what she says and does as being completely self-obsessive. You can't, I mean you can, but when you go to Instagram and you go, oh God, I wonder, you ever just wonder what you look like to other people like once a week? And then you do it on your podcast, and I'm sure it's somewhere else as well where I'm not following her. Everything comes off as more of a self-fulfilling prophecy than it does like an introspective conversation. Just my 2 cents. Trisha did get to make a comment. There were a couple in there, sort of a recurring theme. She said basically that she treats what happens online as being just the internet, which is cool. That's honestly a great way to look at the internet. That's kind of how I view the internet. Does that make it okay for her to talk shit because, you know, her words can deeply affect other people, even though she views the internet as just the internet? That doesn't make it right, right? Like, just because you view it as one thing doesn't mean that other people can't be deeply affected by it. But on the other side of that coin, I do agree with her when she says, who fucking cares what other people that you don't know think about you, regardless if you fall in the same social circles or not. To my previous point, spending so much time worrying about how you're perceived is only going to ruin you as a person. Spending your time trying to be right instead of happy is going to ruin you as a person. And that's a blanket statement for everyone. If you're spending all your time defending yourself against a foe, I guess, that you're never ever going to defeat, it's never going to actually stop, you're gonna spend your life miserable. Which takes me to Trisha's other point. I thought this was a really salient point. If you are so deeply affected by social media and backlash and shit talk, be it a lie or be the truth, maybe social media is not the place for you. And I really like that sentiment, because I think that applies to everybody. I think that's why kids shouldn't have access to social media. Even somebody who has a career on social media, like Gabbie Hanna, she's very deeply affected by what happens on social media. Your job, your workplace overall, and I know we can't all necessarily avoid this, but like if your work environment is toxic for you, whether that toxicity is warranted or not or whatever, not that anybody warrants, not anything warrants toxicity, but you know what I mean. If the criticism is warranted or not, but you still can't take the criticism, maybe that job isn't for you. I'm just saying. I just thought it was a very astute point. And it was like the only one that she got to make. So overall, this podcast sort of just kind of went in one big fucking circle. They didn't hash out anything. Like I said, it felt like a big trauma dump on Gabbie's part, which I think would have been really interesting and eye-opening for a completely different episode. So many things they could have talked about. Even if they had 15 minutes of them talking about Call Me Crazy, where, you know, asking Trisha how she felt about that, asking Trisha what she thought about that, maybe addressing the fact in the screenshots that Gabbie insisted on writing a song for Trisha and not the other way around. Like, you know, there should have been a third party. I would have been there. I would have loved to have moderated that actual discussion. If you guys want to actually have that discussion, I will fucking fly to LA. No, I won't. There's a global pandemic. I will fucking Zoom you and Zoom you. I will be there virtually and I will moderate the hell out of that conversation because somebody needed to. There needed to be a third party moderator in there. Not because things got buck-ass wild, but because things got buck-ass boring.
Nothing happened! Why am I yelling? This video is too long.
If you stayed this long, you're a fucking champion. Let me know if you stayed this long. There's a prize for you in it. I don't know what it is yet, but there's a fucking prize. The next video will be hashing out some of these comments because I think that one will be a lot more fun. This one wasn't as fun. Why do I sound drunk? It's 9:30 in the morning. Oh, Christ. Tune in for part 2. It should be up by tomorrow, whatever tomorrow is for you. Therefore, it's not a lie. Unless tomorrow is for you what tomorrow is for me, then it could be a lie. What do you know of this? Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you didn't like this video, smash that dislike button. Engagement is engagement. It's the only engagement I'll ever have. Alone forever. I'm proud of it. What? Please subscribe if you haven't already. I make videos whenever I feel like it, and I'm back now. Now that my eye can function, I'm here to gross you out. We're almost to 1,000 subs. When we get to 1,000 subs, there's gonna be a whole weird ass video that goes up on this channel. I also made a second channel, which is where other weird ass stuff is gonna go after I hit 1,000 subs though. Subscribe if you want to. If you don't, no pressure, don't care. No problems. Why not? All the weird stuff isn't gonna go here. This is our commentary space, okay? Okay, great. Hit the notification bell if you want to know how my eye is doing in real time. Follow me on my social media. It's all linked down below. And I guess I'll see you in the next one, or whatever.